Welcome back to RotoViz Overtime. We are joined yet again by the wonderful Scott Barrett. We are going to talk tight ends and running backs ahead of the NFL draft, which I'm sure you can already taste it at this point for NFL round one. And we'll see which of these guys maybe Scott thinks may or may not be going in round one. We'll see how they fall as the dust settles here. Shawn, as always, it is fantastic to have Scott on. Great show on Monday as we talk through the wide receivers. Tight ends and running backs coming up here. And I know you're excited to pick Scott's brain on this. It should be another fun show. And just how excited are you ahead of this NFL draft tomorrow? And obviously, you know your schedule with Ben and what's coming up with Stealing Bananas. Let the crew know what's happening here.
Yeah, we're going to do a live show for day 2. So we know obviously lots of people do day 1, but we're going to do day 2. That is going to be a lot of fun. We had a blast with it last season. But yeah, I can't wait to find out who Scott has here at the tight end position, unlike wide receiver and potentially unlike running back. I mean, running back is this weird class in 2023 where we have a generational guy. Again, we have one of those every couple years. I think he's the best. Well, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to skew Scott's answer here. He alluded to a guy that the two of us both like on the previous show. But you got a couple of backs, and then you have a really long wait before the running backs get interesting again, but then they get pretty interesting late. Tight end is really the flip side of all of that, where we have a couple names being mentioned in the first round. We have potentially a couple more names being mentioned in the second round. We have very athletic prospects. So, I mean, Scott's going to be our guy today, working you through like who you should actually take, because with so much importance now in tight end premium in so many formats, if you can get an elite tight end, it's a huge difference maker for you. But you also think about tournaments like Underdog. If you can land a rookie tight end late and that guy actually produces, then again, I mean, you just save yourself so many picks. So tight end, something that people can ignore, but it's crucial. If you get it right, you will win. And so I'm fired up for that. And that's where we're going to start today. So Scott, welcome back. The wide receiver show was really cool. It was the Marvin Mims special, which is the best special you can have. Can't wait to hear what you have to say on tight ends.
Yeah, let's do it.
And you mentioned at the end of the last show, so I want to get it up front here in case some people, we know some people turn podcasts off before the end. That is part of the podcast game. But when we are at the front, perfect opportunity to pitch it again. You mentioned the draft guide and the work over at Fantasy Points, but I want you to have the floor here again to mention to the OT listeners as to what they can find from you over there and what they should be checking out over at Fantasy Points.
Yeah, thank you. You can check out our free NFL draft guide that's done by Brett Whitefield, who is basically our resident film scout. And then you can read my articles on the running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Basically, consider me as your director of analytics for your fantasy football team. And then you can use those together to really make the best decisions for your drafts. All that stuff is free this year. So I suggest you take advantage of it over at fantasypoints.com.
And you can check out Scott on Twitter as well, at Scott Barrett DFB. But Shawn mentioned it. We are a little bit excited potentially about this tight end class. Tight ends can be extremely valuable, especially when you're playing in tight end premium leagues, like a lot of the leagues that myself and Shawn and now as kind of a symbiotic relationship our listeners play in over time. But is this class really as good as it's been advertised to be?
Probably not, just because Musgrave.
It's always we always overhype these things too.
Darnell Washington, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. They don't really have the analytics profile to justify their draft capital. I'm open to being wrong. This is just the analytics profile. We'll see what happens when draft capital enters into the equation. But I write these articles without factoring that in. But I mean, the top 3, I really like the top 3 tight ends in this class quite a bit.
So you mentioned the top 3, and for a lot of people, it is a top 2. And in many ways, they're very similar, but they also create some or offer some very interesting contrasts. Break down the Mayer versus Kincaid battle for us. And if there's a direction that you're going pretty heavily, the prices now have gotten fairly similar. So maybe price is no longer that much of a question. Maybe it will be again after the NFL draft. We'll have to see. But break this down for us.
Yeah. So my tight end 1 is Michael Mayer. It I feel really good about that, but it was close. With my model, if I just like tweaked one thing really slightly, it could have Kincaid above him. But just looking at their analytic profiles and their totality, I do feel really good about it. The guy was an immediate day one producer at a really high level, and he's just been working as the team's wide receiver one, putting up some insane tight end stats, some historically great tight end stats. Whereas and the one knock on him, I suppose, is he was above average. He was like 66th percentile in athleticism. We know athleticism matters more for the tight end position than it does for any other. It's important. I think it's still overstated to a large degree, but it is really important. Kincaid, we don't have any athletic testing numbers, but everyone is saying he would have been more or less a freak athlete. His 2022 season was absurd. You can argue, it's close, but you could argue that season was better than any season that Mayer put out. Again, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that, but it's at least close, and it was a really ridiculous, great year. What I go back to with Mayer is just like Mayer was, Kincaid's also like a year older than Kyle Pitts. that definitely matters. That factors in the equation. He's 1.6 years older than Mayer. But the one concern was that he never outproduced Brant Kuithe as the team's tight end one. Kuithe suffered an injury in like the third or fourth game this year, and up until that point, Kuithe was still outproducing him. So you do worry a little bit about that. But again, I really like him. My model really liked him. So it's a very close tight end one, tight end two. The NFL mock draft cognoscenti kind of has it like, well, Kincaid is definitely the better receiver with more upside. Mayer's just the safer pick, you factor in that he's a better blocker, and that's why he goes tight end one. So if you want to look at that, if they're right, then yeah, you should absolutely draft Kincaid, who is the better receiver, which is what you want for fantasy. I just think they're underrating Mayer's ceiling significantly. Like the knocks you put on this guy, he was a good athlete, but not freakish athlete for a freakish class. Whatever. Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews, Jordan Reed, those guys were all 4.6 40-yard dash times, 4.7 even. TJ Hawkinson. So I think it's one of those things where a guy is just far and away the best tight end in the class for 3 years in a row. You kind of just, lose some luster. You kind of, we already talked about this guy. But this new guy, he's really exciting. So I think he's a really good prospect. I think he's worthy of a late round one pick in tight end premium because, again, I don't like the other positions that much. And you can make the same case for Kincaid.
Scott, you and I are in a league together, the Animal Shelter League that we're drafting right now. It's a pre-NFL draft format. And you and Danny Kelly, your co-manager there, selected Mayer. Would you have picked him if Kincaid hadn't actually already gone earlier? And you kind of already answered this question, but if people are drafting for best ball and they want instant production, do you have a lean one way or the other? I guess for me, it's difficult because I watch the two guys and one looks exactly how you described him. Very athletic, freakish, scoring a lot of fantasy points. The other guy looks slower than the very solid. He looks less athletic than the solid athleticism you described, but the one-handed catches are there, the production is there, and it kind of brings me back a little bit to this conversation we had related to some of the wide receivers, where it's easy to say, okay, well, this guy is going to come out and give instant production because he finished with a lot of production at the end of his last season, but it was actually the other player who gave much quicker production in college, which we often see translating in a similar way to the NFL. So kind of filtering through those elements, are you picking Kincaid when you need production right away?
No, I'm taking Mayer just because I do have him as my tight end one, but I said it's really close. And even in the article, I think I left myself an out. Like give me the right to occasionally take Kincaid over Mayer if I want, but like just know I'm mostly taking Mayer because again, like the athleticism, the receiving upside, that is what matters. I just think the NFL is kind of missing the mark. I think he's okay. He's not Travis Kelce, but maybe look at Jason Witten, right? Okay. Jason Witten was a freak athlete at his combine, or fairly freakish, but I mean, like, look at like the second half of Jason Witten's career. He played till he was 40.
He wasn't a freak athlete at the end.
Definitely not. And he was still, a tight end one. He was still somewhat of a PPR cheat code. I just think they're underrating Mayer's floor. Like you said, the guy was a beast from day one. That matters. He's just not that fast and he's not that explosive, but the numbers were there, and he wins in other areas by other means. And no, I do feel good about it. I think the NFL is a little off on this point.
So you're kind of giving us mid-30s Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez as Mayer's like entire career.
No, he's good. He's good. He's just, again, he's not unathletic. He's 66th percentile. He's just not Zack Kuntz, who was,
I think there's times when if it's not and I think we talked about this last week, Shawn, if it's not in the 90s or above, we think these guys aren't athletic, whereas, they're still very athletic when it's in the 66th percentile. So I think it is going to be interesting to see how, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how these guys are going, who looks more like Antonio Gates and who looks more like Heath Miller out there, for example. But when we look then at Darnell Washington, we're moving on to next. And where do you see him this year with an instant impact and then moving on down the line? What's your thoughts on him moving into the NFL? And then do you think the draft community, fantasy community would be even higher on him if he hadn't played with Brock Bowers?
So I'm sorry. I just pulled it up. Yeah. So Michael Mayer is only like 12 spots below Mark Andrews, probably above Dallas Goedert in my athleticism model. Again, I think, they're just splitting hairs, NFL's being like nitpicky on a guy who's just been a stud for 3 years. For Darnell Washington, this isn't my tight end 3. This is my tight end 4. He is a freakish athlete. He's not as freakish as Kuntz or Musgrave, but he's right there. He's basically tied with Musgrave. Here's what I like about him is, granted the raw production wasn't there, but that's understandable with Brock Bowers on the team. Brock Bowers is a god. He's superhuman. He's, I don't know, the white Kyle Pitts. We'll see what happens next year. We'll talk about him next year, you and I, Shawn. So he was stuck behind him just like Roshan was stuck behind Bijan Robinson. You could say that's like being stuck behind a Pat Mahomes where, yeah, sure, the receiving production wasn't there because he's the receiving tight end, whereas Washington was more, chip blocks and blocking, but he smashed in all of the stats that would matter, or the stats that you could smash if you're playing behind Brock Bowers, which, by the way, I think just about every tight end in this class would be behind Brock Bowers. And those stats are, he leads this class in career yards per target average, depth adjusted yards per target, yards per reception, missed tackles forced per reception, yards after the catch per reception, and explosive play rate. So that's the upside argument if you want it. But ultimately, he's just my tight end 4, and he's not someone I'm super excited about.
So give us the other guy that you are extremely excited about, and I make the case that maybe he should be the tight end 1
for my tight end 3. All right, well, he should be the tight end 1 because he was on a bad offense, a really bad offense, but he put together 2 of the top 15 best ever tight end seasons by yardage market share. His 2022 season ranks second best since 2008, above any season from Michael Mayer, above any season from Dalton Kincaid. It's not his fault that this offense was garbage. The quarterback was garbage. His 1.8 yards per route run across his career was slightly less than Mayer's 1.95. But LaPorta was beat out Mayer against tougher competition, against Power 5 opponents. He was also running higher level of difficulty routes, He led the class in routes run as an ISO receiver, and also led the class in routes run when lined up out wide. He leads the class in yards per route run against man coverage. And so what all that's saying is you're at a disadvantage against man coverage. You're at a disadvantage in ISO or when lined up as an outside wide receiver and not in the slot. So, factor that in. You could argue because he was running these higher level of difficulty routes, his production profile is actually better than Mayer's, better than Kincaid's. But that's just me answering the question that he's also a freak athlete, by the way. It's just that you asked me to make the tight end one argument. I wouldn't have him tight end one.
That was perfect, though. Perfect.
Where do you have him?
Well, now tight end one, you just made the perfect argument. Exactly what I asked for. So, what about the remaining guys here? We got to save a couple minutes to get your bold predictions on the running backs. We have athletic tight ends remaining. Some people are fired up about them. How excited are you for the athletic tight ends?
It's just really hard to make a pro Luke Musgrave argument analytically. He ranks among all tight ends in this class. He ranks either worst or second worst in career drop rate, career yards after the catch per reception, career missed tackles forced per reception. And he has 3 career games with at least 60 yards. Mayer had 30 career games. And so the NFL is saying, oh, this guy, he would have been a superstar if he didn't get hurt because his first 2 games were awesome. Yeah, but he also only has 2 good games in his career. Whatever draft capital happens here is I'm agnostic. Otherwise, just, hey, if he gets the draft capital, I'll really like him. If he doesn't, but it's just that, the analytics profile is rough. And that's kind of what I'm seeing for a lot of these guys in this class.
But give us Kuntz. I mean,
oh, okay.
Somebody who's, it feels like there are some red flags, but is he the most athletic of these tight ends?
Yeah, absolutely. He's, for me, the 7th most athletic tight end to participate at the combine since the year 2000. He also looks like a near perfect Jimmy Graham clone with better jumps, which is weird because Jimmy Graham famously was, a basketball player. He had really good production, really good volume 2 years ago. I think he was hurt last year. The issue was the efficiency was awful by depth adjusted yards per target over expectation. It was bottom 40 of 4,500 qualifiers since 2014. No player in the bottom 100 has ever been drafted by an NFL team. That's a red flag, but absolute freak athlete. You just wish an absolute freak athlete would be more productive. To me, there's a 4% chance he's the next Jimmy Graham or the next Antonio Gates. 2 guys who didn't have a lot of football experience, but were beasts in the NFL. But there's also probably a 78% chance he's the next Jamison Cons, who is a Vernon Davis clone, maybe even more athletic than Vernon Davis, but who never did anything at the NFL. But I'm not really a traits guy. I'm not really an athleticism guy. I feel like you're the Seahawks, Shawn, and I'm some team that devalues athleticism. The Seahawks have a sick track record, so.
Well, it's fun when the guys are athletic, and the NFL, pretty high level. If you stand out athletically, even within that group, but no, we're emphasizing production here. We gotta get the lowdown on players who are exciting. Also, we have to get in there and trade ahead of you and Danny for the 4th round picks to grab up the most fun guys here. Colm, take us to running backs.
Yeah, and the running backs we're going to go bold predictions for the NFL draft at the running back position, and it's kind of going to be, Scott, we start a sentence, you finish the sentence. You can have as many words in the sentence as you want, or it can be very short. Except it can't just be it's Marvin Mims. It can't be Marvin Mims every time. So the first one I'm going to go with, and it's Bijan Robinson is the best running back since
Marvin Mims.
Perfect answer.
Bijan Robinson is the best running back since at least Saquon Barkley, and I'm very open to the idea that he's a better prospect than Saquon Barkley.
Also, take us back further then. I mean, Saquon is everybody's answer. It seems like I'm going to go Jonathan Taylor just a couple years ago, but I'm hearing like Barry Sanders, maybe Jim Brown from you.
Well, Saquon was what, the year after CMC, right?
Yes.
So it's like, yeah. So I mean, like I don't have him above CMC. There's ways his profile is like better than CMC, but I had, CMC was just oh my god, the GOAT. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, we were both very high on Jonathan Taylor. It's just he doesn't have the passing game. He was utilized as a pass catcher at Wisconsin. I see more upside from Robinson there. Saquon's more athletic than Bijan, but I don't think it's by a lot at all. And I do think he's definitely the better runner. Where do you think about running traits for Bijan versus Taylor? I think they're either like neck and neck. I can make an argument Bijan's a little above by the elusivity metrics that matter to me in my model. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, I think that the long speed really separates them. And so I would still go Taylor there. And he because of the long speed, I think it's easy to lose track of just how elusive he actually is in this short area as well. The place that I think I would give Barkley a pretty significant edge on Robinson in athleticism. And I think that's probably where he closes the gap, because what you're saying there in terms of things like evasion rate and pure runner abilities. And, those of us who just are, which is everybody, who's very much influenced by Barkley's post-injury running, which is not as dynamic as it was pre-injury. But even if you're just purely looking at the college numbers and all of that, Barkley not the level of pure runner that Robinson is. And so that would be the area where Robinson, I think, really gets the advantage over potentially everyone.
So my model really values yards after contact per attempt, missed tackles forced per attempt or touch. That elusivity really, really matters. Unlike, breakaway percentage, which I view as more of like a style stat, not super predictive of future fantasy points. Saquon Barkley, to me, I always thought was overrated as a runner. Like, okay, it was awesome as a freshman and pre-injury, but he was so much of a home run threat where something like, if you take away all of his runs of, 30 or more yards, he averages just like 1.9 yards per carry. That was true in college. That was true as a freshman, as a sophomore. Granted, you can't really take that away, just to me. But like that is exactly who Saquon was. Whereas Bijan is just this tackle breaking machine who gains consistent yardage. And sure, he doesn't have the same home run threat, but I think that wins out at the end of the day. If I'm an NFL team, and then also if I'm a fantasy player as well.
So going to the second one here, the most underappreciated athlete is who?
Kenny McIntosh. No, just kidding.
It's like, did you want more words to explain that one?
I mean, I have it. The best athletes in this class: Deneric Prince, Bijan Robinson. So I guess it's Bijan Robinson because my model says he's a really high caliber, top 10 percentile athlete. He doesn't have Saquon Barkley's speed, but I mean, 4'6" at 215 pounds. That's not nothing, and really good numbers everywhere else. Then it's Chase Brown, Evan Hull, Tyon Evans, Jahmyr Gibbs, Zach Charbonnet, Rashawn Johnson. But like we talked about this. You like having fun. You like drafting athletes, and apparently I don't like having fun, as people on the last episode know from how negative I was. It just doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not excited about Deneric Prince. I'm not excited about Chase Brown or Evan Hull or Tyon Evans. So I guess that leaves us with Bijan and Gibbs, who I just think they're awesome.
They are awesome. And so we have to make a stipulation for the next question, which is who's going to be the running back who will at some point, not initially this season, obviously, the running back who will go on to catch 100 passes, but in the non-Gibbs division.
Is this over their career? Or am I supposed to see them doing this in a season?
You got to see him doing it in a season.
Who's the next Matt Forte?
I guess I would bet on Bijan Robinson. Like, a lot of other people talk about the predictive nature of team reception market share or something like that. To me, like it's more, what's more predictive than the volume is receiving efficiency, like yards after the catch per reception or receiving missed tackles forced per reception. Plus also that production, but what's also predictive is being an elite runner is predictive of pass catching numbers in the pros. And so Bijan is, in my opinion, a really high level wide receiver, but also an elite running back. So I could see him doing that on the right team. But if this question was just like, who's the second best receiver in this class? I think it's Kenny McIntosh, unironically, like horrific athleticism, horrifically bad, but just production profile, really strong, really looks like one of the better pass catchers to come out in the last 5 years.
So you had mentioned him and then said you weren't excited. Evan Hull, not somebody who, again, so take the number down some, not someone who's going to break out as a pass catching running back.
Definitely not excited about Evan Hull. Who am I excited about? No one, because I don't love this class, but I think Chris Rodriguez could be, James Robinson 2.0 or Tyler Algier 2.0. I do actually like Kenny McIntosh. I'm like scooping him up at the 412 in rookie drafts, but like that's the 412 in rookie. Like it's just, he had a really good profile and then a death knell athleticism score. So, hey, you never know. Dwayne McBride. I don't like small school running backs, but he's going cheap. Maybe he's the next Jordan Howard. Also played at UAB, but he's a lot smaller than Jordan Howard, but like same profile in terms of hyper efficient, brings nothing as a pass catcher. Or maybe he's the next like Darrell Henderson, who's like a guy who just crushed in the non-power 5. But you never know. Maybe he's the next Kareem Hunt. That's just those would be the guys I think who stand out to me. Earlier, I'm a big Kendre Miller guy, but I think I've over-explained this answer.
Moving on to day 3 potential prospects. Who's the best 3-down prospect on day 3? Is there anybody, or is there somebody who stands out? That's a tough question. Who's the best running back of all time on day 3?
Yeah. So again, I don't like this class, and like I value running backs the same way as like my model does, like which was accidental. I didn't like intentionally plan for that, but I want every down running backs. Yeah. I want bell cow running backs who are used as both a runner, receiver, rank highly in snaps, carries, targets, red zone opportunities. If you're not that, if you're just a situational early down workhorse or a scat back or whatever, I don't want you. You're kind of just clogging up roster space. And so I don't see that. Zach Charbonnet, I don't view as a every down 3-down prospect. So, Kendre Miller, I like a lot. He's not a pass catcher. So I definitely don't see one falling on day 3. I think there's only 2. I think Bijan is, the last of the bell cows, like the last of the Mohegans. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is there. If everything breaks his way, could be the next Austin Eckler. But outside of that, no, I don't think there is any.
Well, you mentioned Miller, and so he potentially is the answer for the next question. But I mean, you kind of set us up to say that you don't have one, but who do you hope doesn't fall in drafts? So outside of those top 2 guys, and we obviously hope that they hit good landing spots too, because I mean, Robinson and Gibbs could be dramatically affected by bad landing spots. That's the way it works for running backs. Who do you hope doesn't fall in the draft because you do want to take them and you want it to be something where, I mean, you're taking them with a shot at meaningful production, good landing spot. You want that signal that the team actually likes them, as opposed to, we had to make picks and we only had a handful of players we knew about here late in the draft.
Yeah, the guy I'm hoping for is Kendre Miller. I have him as my tight end 3 in this class, above Charbonnet. My model really liked him. To make an argument for him, it's like honestly tough. He's just like wasn't elite anywhere, but he was just good to great everywhere and good to great enough to rank above some of these other names. Minimal pass catching usage, but he was at least efficient on a per reception basis. I don't think that matters enough because the volume was so low, but it's Kendre Miller. But again, it's I don't see him as a bell cow. I don't really see him as a guy to get excited about. He's like poor man's Joe Mixon to me, but like pretty poor. And yeah, that's what I think. What about you?
Awesome.
What's your answer, Shawn?
Well, I would love to see Chase Brown go somewhere where the team really believes in him. You've got the guy who is just big enough, a fantastic athlete. I mean, you would have liked to see a little bit different arc in college, but with how much he was leaned on late, I think that some of these guys are going to be good. I have been kind of loading up. I've loaded up in the draft that you and I are in together. I believe I got Miller in that draft very late, which was exciting. And so I think that stockpiling some options in this draft and avoiding the receivers kind of in that range, you always make a great pitch for the bell cows. We know that in order to build your team around them in Dynasty or to burn roster spots on them, if you're in a thinner format, Colm and I play in the RotoViz Triflex leagues over at the FFPC, which only 20 roster spots. And so you can't be clogging your roster with a bunch of these guys who, really in 20 roster spot leagues, I mean, they're free agents, right? You got to pick them up when they actually have that opportunity. But the mix of guys who are kind of in that 210 range, and it's kind of funny because you always like to draw the contrast between the way you and I are looking at the running backs, and then we more or less like the same guys. Charbonnet is somebody that I've been telling people to, not completely avoid, and not that he's going to be a bust, but there are some concerns. He's probably a little bit overvalued, and a bit, don't go crazy thinking that he's nothing. But yeah, I think that this class does have some fun players there. And I mean, I like the guys who are in that range where they're big enough, but they're not so big that, and again, that's one of the reasons why Barkley is such an unusual guy, because he's a huge player who has athleticism. These guys who are in the 220, 225, 230 range, you got to be very special athletically, or else you're just a guy who the coaches throw into the line because they don't have their creativity or the mental flexibility to realize that those broken tackles don't mean anything because the guy breaks 3 tackles and gains 2 yards. And so the guys who are, what's that?
Tank Dell.
Yeah. So the players who are in the 210 range here could be just big enough, and we'll see if they are.
Tank Bigsby, I meant. Sorry.
As we take us out here, thoughts on Bigsby? He's somebody who I think is controversial because the production at the end, I think, underwhelming, and the size, athleticism profile, he improves it with the pro day. But I mean, that's the guy who, when you look at the latest production and you look at size, speed, is he athletic enough to be anything other than just one of these very replaceable running backs at the NFL level?
I mean, so that's a good question. He's fairly unique because he bombed the combine. He tested out as like a really mediocre athlete or sub-mediocre, and then he crushed his pro day. He put on 5 pounds, and his 40-yard dash went from 4.56 to 4.45. But to me, like analytically, he did look like the sort of guy who can win a fist fight in a phone booth, but just totally lacks juice. You contrast his numbers with that of his teammate Jarquez Hunter. Hunter smashed him in yards per carry, rushing yards over expectation per attempt. It wasn't even close. Adjusted yards per carry by efficiency against stack boxes versus light boxes. And Bigsby was like really unique in the sense that he was the only running back who's actually more efficient against stack boxes than light boxes. He was worse in the class at yards per carry when first contact came beyond the line of scrimmage. So all that paints the picture of, again, a guy with the dreaded contact gene who lacks juice. Like yards after contact per attempt is so important to my model, as is missed tackles forced. And he had that only his last season, but he didn't have the prerequisite yards per carry average to where he's just sort of that guy who just runs into defenders and like, okay, maybe he'll break one and then gain like an extra 2 yards on a good day. Not a ton of, explosive plays. I think just 2 over 50 yards over the past 2 seasons. But yeah, and then he crushed the pro day. So he was a little interesting. Ultimately, like why would you draft him? Just draft Jarquez Hunter next year. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this class from a macro perspective. Part of the reason why I am a little lower on it is just because, well, the NFL draft community is saying this is the deepest running back draft in X amount of years, but like deep doesn't really matter to me. Like I care about good, not deep. And you just look at available landing spots. There's like zero exciting landing spots. And part of that is because we just also had one of the best, deepest free agency classes ever. And now it's one of the deepest rookie running back classes ever. There's just like no good landing spots. Like I said before with Bijan, the last of the bell cows. Bell cows are dead. I'm team zero RB now, Shawn. Like seriously.
Oh, there we go.
Everyone is a committee back now. Everyone is a committee back. So you got Bijan. Hell yeah. Let's draft Bijan, the last of the bell cows. You got Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and it's like there's no one else. And like one of those teams could draft. I mean, it's whatever. It's just bad. It's just rough times. So Bijan's exciting, and then all these other guys. It's like, where are the good landing spots? We just talked a bunch about the running backs, but all these guys are, we know, so landing spot dependent, so draft capital dependent. But ex ante, looking at where we're at today, it's hard to get excited beyond Bijan Robinson, who's a guaranteed bell cow because he's so good, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, who could be Austin Eckler because he's such a good pass catcher.
So you're feeling like the post NFL draft breakdowns at the running back position, and people who have looked into it, I think, are on top of this, but it's going to be, I'm not brutal per se, but it's going to be rough for people when they're looking at their own rosters and when they're trying to figure out the excitement about players that they liked. The post NFL draft is going to be more about how the rookies hurt veterans than landed in spots where they're going to go and emerge. Is that your thought?
Right. I mean, I just think it's gross everywhere. It's just like a bunch of committees everywhere. But yeah, the rookies are going to hurt the free agency class. In my best ball drafts, we're going like super zero RB and loading up on rookies late. But just from the perspective of this rookie class as a whole, it's like I don't see any bell cows or any running backs to get excited about besides the top two. And looking at landing spots, where is someone going to be a bell cow where you're excited? Like Kendre Miller, who I do like, put him where is he going to be like a fantasy RB1 or high-end fantasy RB2?
The big takeaway here, Shawn, is that we've got Scott over to zero RB.
I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to talk about it. This is the most zero RB. Oh my! I'm all in. Let's go. Let's do it. Anti RB.
When you look at that from a rookie draft perspective, though, one of the questions that we've had that is, I think, a really interesting question. We've had listeners ask, if now that we actually have moved into the zero RB and or kind of at most this hero RB era, why do we not have JSN or especially the quarterbacks at the 101 if that's the case? My argument has been because Robinson is so unique that actually if we're now into zero RB or hero RB, it makes it more valuable if he's the one guy who can thwart some of these trends. But I mean, people have made some of those arguments for other players before where I've definitely thought, look, you're just kind of misunderstanding how valuable zero RB or hero RB is. And it's not actually an exception. Which side of that do you fall on for how people are approaching? And we didn't talk about QBs and we don't really want to get into that. But looking at the 101 and Superflex, are you really comfortable with Robinson?
For sure. It's because of positional scarcity. Like there are 5 running backs I want to own in Dynasty, and Bijan's one of the 5, and he might be number 1 on the list. So because he's a bell cow, because he's going to get a high number of carries and targets, and because he's really good. Beyond that, like committee backs who lack upside just don't really move the needle for me, and they're also older. So yeah, like an ideal dynasty startup for me is something like Bijan, and then my other running backs are going to be, I don't know, cheap old guys, and I'm only going to have like 2 or 3 of them on the entire team, and then just the rest is getting these wide receivers. Luckily, you can get a JSN late. what is it, 3 rounds later, 2 rounds later.
Awesome. I'm excited to see now how this develops over the next 12 months when we have you on again for the NFL draft next year. It'll be just a 0 RB draft conversation, I think, is what we're going to go with. But really awesome to have you on, Scott, for both shows this week. If people haven't checked out the wide receiver conversation that we had on Monday's episode, head on back and check that out. Make sure you follow Scott on Twitter at ScottBarrettDFB and at fantasypoints.com. I still mention Twitter at the end of everything. I know when Shawn's off Twitter, Shawn's decided long ago that was the right thing to do. Shawn, there's a lot of people, it seems like, are having issues with Twitter over this last couple of months, but this last week in particular seems to be a little bit of a meltdown over there in the Twitter area, but we'll see. We might be plugging different social medias as shows move into the future, but awesome stuff. And of course, check out all his work over at fantasypoints.com. You can check all of Shawn's work at rotoviz.com. And Shawn, of course, will give one final plug to the Day 2 show. We'll be back here on Friday. We have to figure out, Shawn, what we're going to actually talk about, because we'll be recording that before the NFL draft. We might do something a little bit fun, but what's happening on Day 2?
Well, Ben Gretchen and I will have Stealing Bananas live feed. That's when, I mean, it sounds like all these guys could be overdrafted into round 1. I love that because those are the players that I'm interested in talking about. But Day 2, that's where you're going to get the rest of round 1 for your rookie drafts, round 2 for your rookie drafts. Scott, tell the listeners as you take us out here, you were going to have a comment on Twitter. Obviously, people love you on there. But also, what media are you guys doing for the draft live this year?
Oh, yeah. We're doing a live stream for Day 1 of the NFL draft and Day 2 of the NFL draft. It's me, Brett Whitefield, and a handful of guests. If you're available, Shawn, would love to have you on as a guest, and we can dive deeper into how I'm now trying to be embraced by the 0 RB community. I don't know if they'll take me after my years of slander, but I'm here for it.
This is wonderful. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. And until we are back on Friday, enjoy round 1 of the NFL draft. Have a good one.